What's up? It's Mike Mal, and you are listening to the Athletor podcast, where we dive into the processes, mindsets, strategies of some of the most successful athletes and coaches from all walks of life. Athletor podcast coming at you. This week's guest, none other than Pat Brucki, assistant coach over at Stanford. One of the things that I really got into with Pat was his work harder, not smarter mentality. Now, you don't generally think of an Ivy League education and a Division I wrestler going that route very often these days, but he is the hammer that is looking for their nail every aspect of his life. We also talk a little bit about some of the changes that you see in NCAA wrestling today and how guys are being held out for the sake of rankings and things like that. And I bet you're not even going to come close to guessing who is on his Mount Rushmore of wrestling. It's all coming up next on the Athletor podcast. Athletor podcast, we are back again. Pat Brucki, thank you so much for jumping on with us today, brother. I got a lot to talk to you about. First and foremost has to be that mustache. Tell me about it, brother, because I remember you rocking that at Michigan for sure.
Yeah, I figured it was going to come up. Glad to be here, man. I really appreciate what you're doing. This place is awesome. You guys are doing a great job. But yeah, the mustache. So COVID came around, it started with like, all right, you're 2 weeks on your own at home. That's what everybody thought it was going to be. So, Of course, a bunch of college wrestlers are like, oh, I think I'm going to grow a mustache. I don't have to see anybody for 2 weeks, So mine just kind of stuck. And it didn't look great, to be honest with you. There's, you go through waves and phases of, all right, the first 2 weeks probably shouldn't be in public. The next 3 weeks, probably stay away from, school buses and stuff like that, And then eventually it just doesn't even matter what it looks like. You just keep it going. It's the energy, it's not even about what it looks like. It's what it brings to the table.
The stashy vibe is a thing for sure. Yeah. It is a thing. All right. Hey, so give me the backstory, man. I love you and your brother so much. And I think one of the reasons that I love you guys so much is you just seem so opposite as humans. I could be wrong, but you just seem, I don't want to use the word whimsical, but he is more of a free spirit, and you just always look like a hammer trying to find a nail wherever you go. And correct me if I'm wrong, please.
No, I mean, you're 100% accurate. It's crazy. We're 99.99% genetically identical, but we're on complete other ends of the spectrum. When we get together and we're, having a good time at the holidays, we kind of blend a little bit and turn into the same person, but our demeanors are just totally different. He's a free, spirited guy. He's extremely sociable, extroverted, and I'm not.
No.
I'm not as an approachable guy. So right. I think I got a resting face,
There you go. So it's not that point. I feel you on that, though. I do. And here's why. I had a woman, this was years ago. She comes up to me at a bar and she said, "You have the face of a Disney villain." And I don't know how to take that, lady, but I can see people coming to you with the same thing. You just always look like a hammer trying to find a nail. Now, you're the sweetest guy in the world, but
yeah, it's weird. It's definitely not like I'm trying to, play the game of look the part and be a hard ass. It's just, I don't know, I'm focused, and when I'm dialed in, I'm dialed in. So, but finding joy when you're dialed in and like being able to smile in the face of some shit, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, no, it is. So give me the backstory, brother. Give me the origin story. Where did you guys come up wrestling, and how did you find your way to the East Coast?
Hey, don't go anywhere. It's Mike. We'll get back to the podcast in just a second. We got to pay the bills though. Do you have an athlete that's looking to break into the social media space? We at AthletorLive.com have a brand new in-depth tutorial done by none other than Caden Henshaw. If you don't know who Caden is, he's not even a Division I wrestler, yet he's got hundreds of thousands of engaged followers. Learn how to create engaging content, grow your followers, and open up new opportunities in the NIL space. Go to athletorlive.com/Caden and we'll give you the first module completely free.
Yeah, so I'm from Chicago, originally the south side of Chicago. Everybody says they're from Chicago, obviously, but I'm from south, about 40 minutes south of the city. Orland Park is the town. Wrestled for Carl Sandburg, Eric Siebert, Mike Poles, Clinton Poles, Conrad Poles. They've got it was a powerhouse program, kind of as a public school when I was growing up. So, kind of a honeypot situation. I got really lucky being in that environment, and yeah, I mean, I throughout the recruiting process, I was looking at some great schools and total like Big Ten style, scholarship type places and blue chip places, and then on the other end, it was Princeton and the Ivies and some of those other elite schools that can play both sides of the coin academically, athletically, and I just I had a really good connection with the staff over at Princeton and followed them out there.
Yeah. Talk to me about the Princeton experience, because it seems like it's fairly unique. I mean, I'm sure you have similar experience in Palo Alto, but it just seems like Princeton's such a let's take a step back.
Sure.
When you're growing up in Chicago, what did you think of as Princeton, the university? Like what? Like it's like this daunting thing. I grew up 15 minutes from there, so to me it was like, well, we beat their ass every day. Like
Oh, yeah,
everybody
yeah,
from Princeton
exactly.
kind of sucked at the time, so it was
Yep.
like, yeah, it was great, it was fun. But that has changed. But there was always this ivory tower type of mystique around Princeton. Was that your experience when you were in high school?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. I was super fortunate. My parents they've I'm very indebted to them. They've done a
Mm,
phenomenal job of supporting me. They educated me throughout the process. They always stressed education. So I kind of knew, the prestige about it and everything. But growing up like in that area, much different than growing up in Jersey or in the Northeast where these Ivy League schools are all around you, stone's throw away. There was definitely the mystique of like, oh, it's just Harvard, it's just
mhm,
it's Yale, it's Princeton. Like, so it kind of blends together and they just kind of seem all the same as a kid from the Midwest who doesn't really know any different. But
mhm.
then once you go out there and see differences there and you see the programs, you see the staffs, who's involved, what they're doing. To me, it was a clear answer. And it is a unique experience, man. That first off, I'll never like I'm just not the kind of guy that like I'm gonna bash other programs or anything. Like
Yeah,
it was amazing for me. I loved Princeton, but it was it was freaking hard, man. And
yeah.
I chose the path personally. It's just who I am. I wanted to find the hardest path I could find. So I studied structural engineering at an Ivy League school, wrestled Division 1. Like I wanted to find the biggest challenge I could, and I got it. So
Oh boy, did
like
I get it.
yeah, it sounds nice on paper, and then when it's staring you in the face, right around midterms, and you got Iowa around the corner, and you got to make weight, it gets a lot. But I will say, that place finds a way to challenge people, not just like with curriculum and content, but you got to be a problem solver, and that's what that place does really well. A little bit different strategies at in Palo Alto. It's a little bit more relaxed, I would say, a little bit more laid back. We don't see as much of that stress on our guys, which I think is good. There's
Mhm.
some of these some of these places like putting stress on a kid just to put stress on a kid, or making things hard just to make them hard without a purpose. That's
Can you give me an instance of that, like something that happened in Princeton that they would put undue stress on you guys?
yeah. So I mean, could be a simple example of taking exams, on the road. There was a lot of rigidity there. Like Princeton was very much like, no, this is what you're doing. We're not going to make any exceptions for athletes. You're taking it at this time, whatever. I think there was an NCAA tournament. I think my sophomore year, maybe my junior year, I took 7 hours worth of exams in the hotel the night before the tournament, down to weight. Like you can't tell me that's the best thing for a student athlete trying to succeed in all areas of life, right? So I think there's, looking on the flip side, some other programs, they're a little bit more understanding. They understand that this is a kid that's driven academically. going to handle their stuff, but we also want to support them athletically, right? So I think it's kind of the philosophical approach and the mission of the university.
So what made you as a human want to go the path of the most resistance possible?
Yeah,
Where did it
that's
come from, I guess, is my question.
there's a lot to unpack there. I'm kind of a unique guy, I think. I've got a tattoo on my ribs that says work harder, not smarter. So I'm just not a I'll take the stairs every time I can. I'll refuse an elevator, or an escalator. I want to choose the hardest path, just the pride of it, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of an idiot. And of course it bit me quite a bit throughout my career, and I was always overtrained, but I learned a lot, and now I get to share that experience with other people. But that's that's just who I am, man. It's weird. I've always been that way, and I can remember, even as I was a kid, like my dad just telling me, work smarter, not harder. Like pick up one at a time, not four at a time, and then you finish it quicker. And I just couldn't do it. I carry all the groceries in all at once and drop a bunch of bags. It's like that's just who
So
I
it bleeds into every aspect of your life.
every aspect. It's crazy. Yeah, it's and my brother and I, like, we're totally opposite in that direction too.
Mm.
So we've got some good comedy that goes back and forth when he's busting my balls.
I'm sure. I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
So I guess what people probably don't know, maybe they do, is that if you graduate from Princeton or any of the Ivy League schools, you can't compete for them
Yeah,
again, even if you have eligibility left.
right.
And so seeing you wind up at a place like Michigan really was kind of a no-brainer. And I don't, in a world now of the transfer portal and this and the NIL, and I mean, you got guys that are at 97 right now that are on their third school.
Right.
Well, that wasn't really the case for you, bro. Like you went to Michigan. Tell me what was your life like there, and how did it differ from the Princeton experience?
Yeah, totally different ends of the spectrum, right? I did a grad program at Michigan, and it was maybe a year and a half program, and I just smashed it in 1 year and crushed it, and it was awesome. So I challenged myself academically, but it was kind of like swinging the heavy bat, like with a donut, over at Princeton. Then you take the donut off, and the bat just starts flying, and you're swinging super fast. So it was much more manageable academically, even though I was in a tough program. But um, super grateful. I have nothing but amazing things to say about that environment, those people, some of my mentors, in the
Yeah.
sport. Kenny, Kevin Jackson for one, Sean Bormet, Sergey Beloglazov. I was training with Olympians, Jaden Cox, Miles Amin, Mason Paris. Like the list can go on and on.
Yeah.
Just an amazing place. And it was I kind of got forced out of that situation a little bit. My junior year at Princeton, they canceled the NCAA tournament right before NCAA's, and um, I my body was banged up, man. I had already had, I think, 3 or 4 surgeries in college, and I needed both of my hips reconstructed, so I knew I couldn't wrestle that following year. And when COVID hit, so many people were trying to unenroll from the Ivy Leagues, take the year off, and then come back. So there was such an influx of, like, the number of kids that were trying to take gap years. They couldn't guarantee that I was going to come back in a year. They said, we don't know if we're going to have a spot for you. And I was like, listen, I've done a lot for this place, this program. I love this place. I don't want to go anywhere else. And they're like, we can't we can't guarantee that you're going to come back in a year.
Sure.
So I basically was just a senior at Princeton as a academic. I got, 2 reconstruction surgeries on my hips, and I was, you know, in recovery for 12 months. And I just finished the year academically and graduated. And then obviously you can't compete as a grad student. So I had 1 year of eligibility and no other option but to look elsewhere. And it fit like a glove, going to Michigan. That staff is just amazing. The place is amazing. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. I think an overlooked part of that staff is Sergey. That dude's a wizard, bro.
He is a wizard. It's unbelievable, man. he's forgotten more than I'll ever learn.
It's wild.
Yeah.
I love watching him go off on a tangent and throw not 3, but like 15 different options at you and say, yeah, you pick one. Okay, great. I can't do that stuff for sure. You can. But you ever get a hold of a gut on you? Because I've never felt anything like that. I don't know. It's like the perfect placement on the floating rib.
On the floating rib. It's crazy.
It's just every single time it just whoosh, and you're going. But I think talk a little bit about that kind of Russian mentality that he brings to that room, because you can see it in a lot of their international styles.
Totally. Yeah, that's another great thing that they got going on over there is they run the room different coaches run the room. And each guy has a different strategy for how they run the room. If Josh is running the room, it's going to be on a whistle and it's going to be a tough one. Dave brings a different style. Sean brings a different style. KJ brings in a different style. And when Sergey's running it and you get a little bit more of that like laid back international type of like, it's more of a student of the game practice, makes you look at it different. And, I can remember many practices where he's just yelling, davai, 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 and getting us going. And then 5 minutes of drill, and then it's live for 8 minutes, and then back to drill, back to technique, live again, back to drill, back to technique. So it's not as linear as like a typical what we would do in the US, where you drill, you warm up, you get warm, you work some technique, you work into live. It's a little bit more open-ended, which I think is just you're thinking about the sport different, and it's an amazing thing, especially as like young kid in the game, learning that, like taking the sport apart, dissecting it a little bit in ways that you wouldn't have before.
Okay, we got to move on to your now professional career as a overqualified wrestling coach. Like far overqualified. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but you got an Ivy League degree and a master's from freaking
I'm using every bit of it.
Yeah, every bit of it. I mean, your ears tell me all about it. Why go into coaching? Why do you want to torture yourself again?
Well, that's who I am, right?
Yeah.
I'm always choosing the path that's going to self-suffer, I guess. But it was, I have a lot of unfinished business in my own career, and it was pretty underwhelming for a lot of different reasons. But I think I've learned a lot. I've always been really introspective about the sport and philosophical. I've learned a ton of that from Coach Ayers. And man, it's a calling. Like there's probably 25 or 28 coaches and teachers in my family. It's kind of who we are. It runs in my blood. And being able to kind of invest in people and their journey and live vicariously through them and get other people where you couldn't get, that's fulfilling. And I think that is a calling of mine, so when the opportunity came up, I left a pretty good engineering job and some amazing people. But I made that jump quick, and it was a no-brainer.
What was the phone call like from Ayers?
This is crazy. So, I was a engineer for a general contracting firm doing electrical infrastructure in Chicago. So I'm on site. I got work boots. I'm covered in concrete. I'm inside a Connex box. I got my HVAC and my plumber subcontractors on site. I'm saying, yeah, you got to install this over here, this over in here. I get the phone call. I'm covered in concrete. Go into the corner of the Connex box. There's tools and mud everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, I quit.
And I'm out.
Yeah. So I think we had a good, I called him when he got the job at Stanford to congratulate him. He called me back. And we just kind of started talking about what the staff looked like and kind of went from there. But it was a quick phone call back to my original boss saying, hey, something came up. We got to talk.
Yeah. And I don't know that people outside the wrestling world really understand that calling. because you left a good job. You left a solid job to go beat up college kids again. And I don't. So what was that conversation like? Telling this dude, like, yeah, I'm just gonna go coach wrestling for them.
Yeah. It's tough, man. Like, I think what goes unsaid in our sport is the detachment from competition, right? Like, once you've ended your competitive career, there's a huge loss of identity almost, and the people that make wrestling a huge piece of their identity, that hits them hard, right? So I think I was there for about a year and a half outside of the sport, and I was still coaching high school at my high school, and that was awesome. But there's a missing piece. There's a missing piece, and I think when you have those conversations with people who understand that a little bit, and they get that, like, this is always going to be here over here, but
Mm.
this opportunity right now to fulfill a passion while you're young, while you can go beat up some college guys and still hang in the room. I mean, that's almost like you got to jump when the iron's hot. So, um, and that said, like, I see myself in this role for a long time. I've loved every minute of it. I'm super grateful to be around the people that I'm around and learning from them. So, but yeah, it's tough, and when you're missing that piece of yourself, you're looking for what's next. What's the next competition? What's the next goal? And it's not there in real life because it's gray and it's a little bit more ambiguous. It's just a running circle rather than like a deadline or a tournament or a season. Yeah, it's hard not to look for something.
Um, we've talked in this podcast. I think that Joel, correct me if I'm wrong. The Garland podcast came up. What you're talking about, that hole that has to be filled, starts when you're young, right? Because we're fed this competition, and we compete everywhere. Like, that's the funny thing to me, is that we as wrestlers tend to compete in everything that we do, right? Like you said, bringing in the groceries. Well, my son and I, we race each other to see who can grab the most bags. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but I think what happens a lot, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is when when a lot of wrestlers lose that competition aspect of their lives, they fill that hole with negative things, drugs and alcohol, whatever. And obviously you didn't seem to go down that path, but how many times, especially growing up south of Chicago, how many times do you see that happen, man? Because it happens.
I mean, there's a lot of some insane talent from my area that comes out of high school, does well in college, and then you see those guys afterward struggling. And you do see that a lot. I think it's a shame, and people do. You got to fill that hole with something, and it's what you choose to fill it with. That's going to really set your path for what your future is going to look like.
Yeah, it can get ugly. So I guess the real question then becomes, is there anything that we can do as a sport to not get, because here's the thing, like, you talk to guys like Kyle Snyder. Kyle's a good example. One of the things that he talks about all the time is wrestling is just something I do, is not who I am. Well, okay, that's easy for you to say, bud, because you're still able to do it at the highest level at this age. But I grew up doing this. I've been doing the same thing since I was 8. Like, this is pretty much who I am. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah,
You
totally.
know, and so but there has to be a duality of it, right? Like, you have to kind of detach yourself a little bit from it. Is there something that we can do in the sport that kind of something we can do in the sport that doesn't leave us with this gaping chasm, every single time? Because that's what I'm trying to do with these high school kids. Like, look, you don't have to make this every aspect of your life. Look, I chose to do it. You don't have to. But what can we do better as a community, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I think you got to encourage people to just what does your life look like outside of the sport? Like compartmentalize your life a little bit. When you're in the wrestling room, yeah, you're a wrestler. When you're in the classroom, you are a student, and that has a path of its own. Kind of pushing kids in that direction to, that's kind of why I chose the Ivy League route versus a meat grinder of a Big Ten situation off the rip. Was I want opportunities afterward. So I think a little bit more of that long-term perspective is important. It's hard to wrestling's tough, man. Like people that go into wrestling, they got to screw loose to begin with.
Sure.
And they're susceptible to going all into it. I think our sport is different than most sports in that sense, but we gotta keep ourselves in check. Like this is just something you do. It's everything right now, but what is next? Keep an eye on what is next. What does your plan look like? Like what does the next 5 years look like if this doesn't happen, if that doesn't happen? And do you have the problem solving skills to put yourself in a new environment and succeed? Some of these guys, like some of the guys I would see going back home or whatnot, we all have are guys that put all their eggs into this basket, and then they're left with an unfulfilled basket. That's tough.
Yeah.
There's very, very, very few people that leave this sport completely fulfilled.
None. There's none.
I
There's
think
none.
a lot of people have
Because
some unfinished business, some regret. And so you're signing up for a heartbreak, I guess, in some senses, but having something bigger or just different than what this basket is important.
yeah, it's I'll give you an instance. And I think as a community, this instance will go further to prove that we're moving in the right direction. I'll give you the instance, okay? One of our athletes at Poway committed to a smaller school. He had some more success on the mat, and a pretty one of the most successful college wrestling programs called me and said, "Hey, we're real interested in this kid. I know he committed to Cal Baptist." It's the kid's name rhymes with Paul Kelly.
Yeah, I think we're following.
I think everyone's tracking where I'm going, so it's not hard to connect the dots here. We're real interested in this kid. Would he consider moving out to the Midwest? And I came to the kid, and he's like, I really got to think about it before I even take the call. I gotta think about it.
Yep.
And he comes back to me the next day, and he goes, "Coach, look, I looked at the school you're talking about. They don't have my degree they don't have the major that I want. I'm really excited for a number of different things. And I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know that I want to wrestle in Big 10 or Big 12. I don't know that I want to do it. Right? Like I've got a finite amount of wrestling matches left in my body. I don't want to burn them every year in the room, And so I just thought it took this incredible foresight from a young kid, right? Like he's a teenager, dude, to go, it's sexy to go want to wrestle in the orange and black. It's sexy to go wrestle in black and gold. It's sexy. And when they call you, you feel like the hot chick at the dance. I get it, right? But here's the thing. I think kids have a lot more options, number one, which is ironic because there's less Division I wrestling teams. But I think they have a lot more wherewithal and a lot more people around them now than they ever have, pushing them in the right direction.
I completely agree. I think some of the people that exit the sport and have that kind of give back mentality, they share that perspective, and it's super important, man. We got to educate our recruits even on how big of a decision this could be for not just the next 4 years, but how could this set you up as a human being, as a man. That's a huge thing that we lean on here at Stanford. It's like, this is a short-term and a long-term play. Can you achieve your goals here? Answer is yes. Can you achieve your goals athletically? Yes. Can you achieve your goals in life? Yes. Is this the place that you have to make a trade-off? No. Is everyone like that? No. You're going to have to make a trade-off somewhere. If it's, yeah, I'm going to choose the athletic route and give something up academically, and maybe that's going to hurt me in the future. Or, I'm going to choose to go the academic route, set up myself for the long term, and maybe that's going to hurt me athletically. I mean, yeah, you got to make an informed decision. And for the people that do, high school coaches, man, the guys that get that and they share that and they breathe that into their guys at a young age. Cheers to those guys, man. Those are the guys that are really, really invested in the sport at the most integral levels. Because sometimes it's, you get a high school kid who's 16, 17, 18, might be too late, or they're just going to go take the sexy opportunity right in front of them because it's flashy, and there's a price tag on it. But yeah, man, you got to have the wherewithal, I think, and good influence at a young age in the sport from parents, from networks around you, from good coaches that get it. Super important.
I keep on going back to this, Joel. We talked about it yesterday with Chael Sonnen. I think a lot of that has to do with professionalism in coaching at a youth and high school level now. I mean, up until very recently, David Taylor was a freaking youth coach. You call it what you want, but Ben Askren, one of the most decorated folk style wrestlers of all time, is killing it as a club coach.
Totally.
Right? Like these guys, there's a level of professionalism and a level of know-how that, look, I grew up back in the early 30s, and the only club around was Ernie at the Edge. And don't get me wrong, Ernie's a great guy, and he's probably one of he's the godfather of club wrestling, as far as I'm concerned. But if you didn't have him in your ear at all times, dude, my high school coach was a good wrestler, but he didn't know how to direct me into you might want to rethink this because of this, or he didn't know what NCAA clearinghouse was, and he didn't know what scholarship packages kind of looked like from different institutions as opposed to in-state and all this stuff. Now we have far more people that are involved at every gamut, every facet of the sport, that can give these kids the education in the process that I just don't think existed back when I was coming up.
Yeah, totally agree, man. Totally agree. I think you could it could get really deep. Like people that, go to higher education for an education degree, they're looking to get into coaching, they're looking to get into teaching. There's just not a lot of job opportunity for those guys. And they would do a great job, but they wouldn't be supported through, like a public schooling system that just doesn't take care of them, doesn't pay them enough,
Right.
or, whatever the situation is. And then they just pivot and go a different direction. And then they had a lot to offer, but they just never fulfilled the opportunity because the opportunity wasn't there. And that's where club coaching is killer. You got to give, our sport needs to give opportunity for sustainable club coaching and giving those guys pump money into the clubs. It's great for our sport. Go to your high school practices. That's awesome. You'll have some great partners. You'll have a great coach, and then go invest in a good club and get taught by an elite level, one of the best folk style wrestlers ever, and do it locally. That guy needs to be taken care of because he's got a lot of upside for our sport. So I think as a sport, if we keep supporting clubs and we keep providing that opportunity and sustainability, that's what's going to help us a lot.
How would you empower people? How would you encourage other people to so where Askren's at right now is pretty awesome, right? Like the dude, from what I understand, they're cranking at 700 to 1,000 members. No, I don't know if you can do it. Yeah, he's crushing. He's got 4 locations. It may be more than that. I haven't talked to Ben in a while, but now granted, he does have the name, right? And he and Max both win national titles. Doesn't hurt. But I think there is a sustainable living that can be made from the guys like I don't know. I always think of Folka, the kid that wrestles for Cornell.
Yeah.
His dad and I, man, I love his dad. His dad's one of my favorite human beings. In fact, he's one of the few coaches that I put a mic on during a tournament just to hear what he says. He's hilarious. Totally aside from this conversation, I want to tell the story because I don't get to tell it very often. His son, Folka's wrestling Dustin Plott in the semifinals of the Fargo Nationals in juniors, and I put a mic on Mr. Folka, and he's screaming at his son, take your left hand high crotch, left hand high crotch, left hand high crotch, left. And bloody murder. Chris Folka goes down with a small injury. I think his knee hurt or something like that. And you hear Mike walk over to him and go, would you get your left hand high crotch? He looks up and he goes, Pop, I don't got a left hand high crotch. He goes, I meant right hand. You know what I meant. Right hand high crotch or whatever it was. But
after screaming it 100 times.
Oh, he bloody murder. But I guess I digress. But the reason that I brought him up was because about, I don't know, must have been 15 years ago now, he was working in the city. I think he had a municipality job, good job in New York City, was living in Jersey, and was doing the club coaching thing part-time. And he's like, what do I got to do to build the numbers? I'm like, you got to be full-time. And that was the advice that I told him, because nobody goes to a part-time dentist, bro. Nobody goes to a part-time dentist. You don't see a guy, in the back of a tire shop who goes, oh yeah, by the way, we do teeth too. Nobody does that. So what, aside from that, what advice would you give a guy like Mr. Folka or a guy starting a club that maybe doesn't have the name that Ben Askren does?
Yeah, it's always capital, right? If you have somebody in your network that's willing to backstop you and give you, here's 6 months and go full time. If you've got a great relationship with your job and say, I gotta see how this works for the next 3 months. There's a huge leap of faith. Totally understand that. Having a big fish around that can, support you for the first kickoff or, whatever you need to really get afloat is huge. And then I think also pushing that on the young wrestling community, man. Go to a club. It's important. It's really important. You're going to get great coaching from your school, private school, public school, but you could get elite coaching, and you could be in an elite room with kids from different areas, different styles, different lineups, different partners. I think that's important. And for guys that are trying to kick that off, I'm no expert, but I think you got to take the leap of faith, and I think you need a little bit of a plan with a backstop and go into it and go all into it, and then maybe it works out.
Yeah, it is. I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but it's worth repeating. I had a decent enough job, but it was just me and my girlfriend at the time. And 5 days before we were getting married, I told her I was going to quit my job and start a wrestling club. And she was less than thrilled. Yeah. I can say she was less than thrilled. Obviously it all worked out, but I think, especially if you are one of those guys that kind of eats, sleeps, shits, and breathes this sport, it's the only way to do it. It really is.
If that's where your passion's at, man, you got to follow it. You might be passionate a little bit about a municipality job or a desk job or something, but like, if this is something that you want to grow, want to increase, want to have stake in, like, it's always going to work out better when you put 100% of your effort into it. And I think that's true for anything.
Yeah. 100%. Joel Shaw, anything else before we get moving on these quick questions here?
No, bring it home.
Let's bring it home, son. All right. Brucki, let's talk. What is the greatest wrestling shoe of all time?
Nike Freak.
Really?
Yep.
You didn't find they're too slick on the bottom?
You know what, man? I got Hobbit feet. I wear like a 13 or a 14, depending on the brand. The narrow shoes I could never do. The Inflicts always feel like socks to me. Adidas was always too narrow. Asics I liked, but the split sole kind of throws me off. The Freak is just like that's my
That was it. That was your
gem,
sweet
dude. I could
spot.
wear those right out of the box, and that works.
They're pretty good, man. They're pretty good. All
Got a
right.
wide toe box.
Yeah, they did. They look, that's for sure. I think that was my foot's kind of narrow. So the Adidas always kind of fit me better, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I lean towards those combat speeds, but I appreciate the Freaks. I like the way they look, that's for sure.
Hey, different strokes, different blokes.
There you go. All right. You only get four, and they got to be American. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Yeah, man, I gotta go. I would say Kyle Snyder because I think he's done a lot for our sport, especially as a young guy.
Yeah.
He put a lot of us on a map in a new era. Kevin Jackson because I've got a amazing relationship with him.
Mm.
Oddly enough, actually, I'll save this guy for last. Um, let's see. I would say right now, to be honest with you, Hayden Hidley.
I love it. I love it.
Look, man, here's a guy that I just admire.
Yeah.
I work with him every day. It's a total joy. I've got nothing but respect for him and his family. Like we're kind of cut from the same cloth, man.
He's a worker.
He's a worker. He gets it. I love learning from him, learning with him. So yeah, he's on there. And my last one, this was kind of like as I was growing up, I was like, I had to track down like CD tapes of his old films and stuff. But I would say Royce Alger.
Wow.
Yeah.
KJ and Alger on the monument.
I
I
mean, have you
like
seen
that.
those matches? Those are incredible.
Yes.
I mean, those
You know
were,
what they looked like? They looked like Rock'em Sock'em robots, just like this. They would just punch each other in the face repeatedly,
totally,
and the last one to fall down
totally.
loses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's just a principled guy, man. Not flashy. He had, I think, a lefty single, and that was
Mm,
about it, and just
yeah.
hooks. And yeah, but he found ways to just break people. And as a young guy, I was like, yeah, I want to be like that guy when I grow up.
Tell me about that. So, it's funny. You brought up having to go through like actual DVDs or video cassettes and find, dude, the things that we used to have to do to find
Film.
footage of the world championships was like, first of all, I don't know how my dad let me hang out at flea markets when I was 14, looking through videos, because I'm pretty sure not all of them were wrestling the way that we would think of it.
Yeah, of
But
course.
they were kind of creepy. Like they were seedy, like they were selling Chinese stars next to the video cassettes, and they had
Yeah.
nunchucks and shit. It was seedy to say the least. But yeah, trying to find some of those old video cassettes, and you know people take it for granted now that everything's just on YouTube,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
I'm still in the hunt for it. I'm kind of obsessed with a guy named Rick Sanders. Rick Sanders just so happened to be our first world champion back in 1968 or 69, one or the other. And he was just this super enigmatic, interesting dude in a time where wrestling was really not controlled, but dominated by Gable, right? That's the guy that Gable was learning from on that 72 Olympic team. And he was such a strange, bizarre cat, and his story's weird. I mean, after the 72 Olympics, he goes and silvers in Munich and then decides to backpack around Europe and gets hit by a truck and dies. Yeah, it's there's so many different interesting facets of the story, but I've been obsessed with trying to find footage of this guy, and there's not much out there. He wrestled for Portland State, and so trying to hunt down people that coached there. I mean, most of the people aren't alive anymore. Some of the people that were involved in the institution are alive but don't have footage. But there's some really good written stuff that's out there, and a guy, Kyle Kleeman, just sent me a couple excerpts from some books. But it's just trying to find stuff like that is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And like
changed.
even Sergey.
Oh yeah. Some of
Dude,
his stuff is on YouTube now, which is awesome, but definitely not all of it.
not even close, because it's even the stuff that's on YouTube is like more towards the end of his career where he was, I don't want to say slowing down, but he certainly wasn't the same thing he was in the 70s and early 80s. I would love to I bet you Sergey actually has him. I should just message him.
He might, man. He's an interesting cat too. I love
He's
him.
an interesting cat for sure. All right. Last question. This is the big one. You get a magic wand and you can change one thing about the sport of wrestling. What would it be?
Yeah, a lot of different directions you can go here. I think there's been a shift in our sport a little bit, for better and for worse, of kind of holding guys out a little bit and playing the long game with protecting the season and stuff. And
Sure.
I never did that, to be honest with you. And
Yeah.
not that it worked out well for me, but I think with the whole landscape that NCAA athletics is going into, and fans are paying good money to go see athletes. It's like I would like to bring back the days where everybody wrestled everybody, and it wasn't a game of, yeah, we're going to hold this guy out. He's not going to go to this big tournament. We're not going to see him. Fans show up expecting to see this matchup and it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just wrestle, man. Let's wrestle the season as it's played out. Go chase the best competition. Don't hold yourself out for this or for that. Like, get tough, get through it, and let's do it, because I'm also on the other end of the spectrum. Like, I wrestled, meat grinders, and we always have. Princeton and now Stanford. We've always wrestled meat grinders of a season. And then by NCAA's, I was just freaking patchwork, like duct tape together, and those guys were like, they didn't even run hard the first 10 sprints, and they just sandbagged the last one and
Yeah.
steal it. But no, I think like, let's get back to the days where everybody just wrestled the whole freaking season, man. Let's just wrestle.
Yeah.
And it's a grind no matter what. Why not go out and compete?
Yeah. Boy, are you going to be disappointed this coming weekend. Trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Not that anybody's going to listen.
But guy that comes to my mind that really not just emphasizes that kind of motto credo. A guy named Steve Neal. He's in my room every day. He goes, why aren't these kids? I had 40 matches going in NCAAs.
Yep.
I would have 40 matches. Now, granted, that's not correct for everyone, and maybe he didn't wrestle at a super high level in high school, so he didn't have that mileage on his body. But he was like, dude, I used to go out of my way. I would stay in town when the bus left sometimes and just wrestle in another little open that happened to be 2 hours down the road. That dude, he talks about that stuff all the time, man. And Steve Neal is an absolute killer.
He's a killer, and he's done a ton for the sport as well. Again, like I'm a harder, not smarter guy. So like, just wrestle now. You got miles on your body, but like, now's the time to do it. And choose the hardest path and just make the season a grind if it's going to be a grind anyway.
I love it. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It was awesome. I appreciate you, and have fun this weekend at CKLV, brother.
Thank you guys so much. You guys are doing a great job, man.
Wait, don't go anywhere before you hit that next button. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, do us a huge favor. Click that subscribe button, and if you're so inclined, leave a review and share it.